This video is powered by patreon.com/founded productions. The historical element of the Assassin's Creed franchise is one of the fans' favourite parts of the games, as it allows an interest in history to be explored on a deeper level than any book or film. With the series exploring so many time periods and settings, we've seen numerous historical figures make appearances in the games, anywhere from quick cameos to being fully fledged characters. So today I want to look back at the series and its best historical cameos. Before we get into it, it would really be appreciated if you could hit like, and if you're new here, make sure to subscribe with post notifications turned on. Without further ado, here are the best historical characters in every Assassin's Creed game. Perhaps the most important Christian commander during the course of the Crusades, Richard I of England's appearance at the end of Assassin's Creed 1 is an incredible moment for history nerds. Said to be one of England's greatest kings, his devotion to cause, country and Christianity leads to an interesting encounter in which he gives Altair the opportunity to prove himself against Robert de Sable, one of the leading Templars in the game, and the standoff between the two is phenomenal. I mean, Richard tells them they have to fight one-on-one, yet other guards still attack Altair anyway, so it's super unfair, but alas, he defeats the Templar foe, and in Richard's words, allows God to decide which one of the men is telling the truth. And I just love the logic of the truth being based on whether you're fucking dead or not. The conversation between Altair and Richard that follows is an interesting one, as the way both men use their words almost cloud their genuine beliefs. Richard presents himself as desiring peace, yet seems to believe violence and war is a natural, intrinsic and necessary part of humanity, as he almost splits the Assassins and Templars' respective beliefs down the middle. Although it's not the best writing in the game by any means, it leaves it with a strong, memorable moment. Now, is this even a question? Leonardo da Vinci isn't just a fascinating historical figure, but he's one of the best characters in this series, standing as Ezio's best friend throughout his 4 decades of work as an assassin. We first meet Leonardo when Maria brings Ezio with her to pick up some of his art, and we immediately see the two men share a passion and curiosity about life, something that carries through as Ezio presents Leo with creative challenges in deciphering the codex pages written by Altair. But this is far from a business relationship, as Leonardo acts as one of the few connections Ezio has with his past life, leading him to value the artist as a brother, something that carries through to Brotherhood with the incredible Da Vinci Disappearance DLC, and then all the way through to Da Vinci's death, for which Ezio travels to France to stand by his brother's deathbed. Every AC fan loves Leonardo, and that's why if you forget to do the QuickTime event in which the two hug, you need to restart the game from the beginning just to get that moment. I don't make the rules. The first 2 games in the Ezio trilogy put a really interesting spin on their villains, as they take a genuinely abhorrent and tyrannous family and add a Templar twist that makes complete sense in the real world historical context. Although this is done well with Rodrigo, it's really Cesare and Lucretia, the incestuous Borgia siblings, that are the most interesting inclusions in Brotherhood. We see through their bizarre relationship the full extent of Cesare's lust for power and control, and the complete lack of moral boundaries he has. Lucretia's jealousy of Caterina shows her as a uniquely damaged individual that is driven by her manipulated love of her brother, and as the game goes on, we see that devotion waver slightly, particularly in the Da Vinci Disappearance, in which we see Ezio seduce information out of her, showing that perhaps all she's truly seeking is love and admiration. She doesn't have the same desire for power that her father and brother do, but she'll do anything for them to value her, a need that Cesare uses to his advantage. Their strange dynamic acts as a perfect counter to the familial story of Ezio, especially in the way his respect for Claudia grows throughout Brotherhood, and the mirroring of the two families really empowers the story of Brotherhood as a whole. Honing in on familial elements, Revelations presents another broken family through the eyes of Suleiman the Magnificent, a young man at a similar point as Ezio in his younger years, in the developmental stages of becoming a great leader. Suleiman is said to be the most successful and significant Ottoman Sultan of the time, with a reign that spanned 45 years in which he expanded the empire's land and wealth, and codified an entirely reformed legal system that was revolutionary for the time, achievements born no doubt from his extensive education. We get insight into the young wisdom of the man in his conversations with Ezio, as he comes to understand the nature of diplomacy through insight into the squabblings of his uncle and father, the violence and death that comes from the corruption and power. Although both him and Ezio face failures and make mistakes in their various endeavours, they both learn a great deal from them, and from each other. Suleiman recognizing what it is to be a great leader, Ezio rediscovering the great optimism of his youth that faded away over his years of violence. The two bounce off each other perfectly, and the relationship is one of the most important elements of the trilogy as a whole. It was difficult to choose the best historical figure in Assassin's Creed 3, as Connor bears witness to near enough every important character within the early years of America as we know it today. He and his father meet near enough every significant founding father, and he fights the most major colonial generals of the time, not to mention uncovering the betrayal of Benedict Arnold. However, it's tough not to put George Washington here, the father of the United States, the first president of the free world, a character who could have easily been idolized by the game. However, AC3 does a fantastic job in presenting the grey areas of these often pedestalized people. Both Washington's greatest triumphs and his darkest flaws are explored in this game, namely through the albeit sketchy plot twist of the man being responsible for the burning of Connor's village during the 7 Years' War. We see a Washington that truly aspires for the greater good, but we also get a representation of the harsh realities of the world, of war, and of the nature of the colonization of the Americas. On top of that, in the King Washington DLC, we get a look into Washington's soul that explores the conflicts of interest that no doubt plagued the man in real life. The game shows us how extensively power can corrupt, and it does so rightfully with the use of an Apple of Eden, the physical embodiment of tyranny, and this element plays into the overarching themes of control, freedom, and compromise that run through Connor's story. Like Leonardo da Vinci in the Renaissance, it's impossible to discuss the golden age of piracy without mentioning Edward Thatch, aka Blackbeard, who we once again get a far more nuanced look at through the course of Black Flag. Being an early ally of Edward, we see how he develops into the feared pirate we all know, building his techniques of intimidation and reputation management to strike fear in the hearts of those he robs. His most important influence on the story of Black Flag, though, is his eventual retirement from piracy, a decision that we see provides him with a peaceful and wealthy life in South Carolina, the exact life that Edward promised to his wife Caroline years earlier, the life Edward once saw as the reason for piracy. But we also see that this life can't be truly lived, as Blackbeard is still hunted and is forced into an ever-ending fight, running from his past life but unable to escape the clutches of karma, eventually dying a tragic death that leaves Edward with further recognition that continuing on his path of riches and glory will leave him exactly where it's left Thatch, along with all his other allies, in the grave. Thatch's death is one of the most poignant moments in the series, because it's the final nail in the coffin, no pun intended, in Edward's decision to join the Assassin Order, and relinquish his selfish ways. Honestly, Rogue might be the least interesting time period in the entire series, and as such it comes with fewer notable historical figures than its counterparts. None of the historical figures feel quite as important either in the real world context or in the story of Shay, and so I've gone with easily the most entertaining character in Rogue, Louis-Joseph Gaultier de Verandry, the king of the cabbage farmer, a constant thorn in Shay's side that never fails to entertain in any of their encounters. The mixture of his heightened accent, his hilarious dialogue, and his absolute disdain of Shay makes him an absolute treat to watch, and leaves him as, aside from Haytham, the most memorable character from this oftentimes unmemorable game. Once again, a character that I can't fail to mention is Napoleon Bonaparte, who is probably the most historically significant military general in recent history, and his inclusion in AC Unity was an absolute essential. What's interesting about the game's inclusion of Napoleon is that similar to other games, it presents him in a younger state than most would think of him, pre-revolution, not yet concerned entirely with his complete domination of the world, however still very ambitious. We see glimpses of this ambition, as his initial introduction shows him still fighting for the King's Guard, aptly against the revolutionary efforts, despite his eventual welcoming of the revolution. As fans of the series knew prior, Napoleon came into the possession of an Apple of Eden, an event we see in the storming of the King's Palace, and this touch of fan service helps in making him even more memorable. Arno briefly allies himself with Bonaparte, which creates an interesting conflict between the two, as Napoleon stands almost antithetical to the values of the Creed. His willingness to dismiss principle for power is clear, and he stands as a great counter for Arno's inescapable devotion to his own. Very similar to Napoleon, AC Syndicate presents another great military mind, Winston Churchill. In the World War I segment of the game, we see another young version of an iconic leader. This is a Churchill that's more concerned with ambition than success, a Churchill that's out of power in Parliament and seeking to regain it. We get insight into his military wisdom and his intelligent balance between public endeavours and underground operations, in ode to his love of espionage and his important influence on the creation and growth of MI5. There's a barrage of historical figures in Syndicate, each with their own incredibly unsubtle introductions, and it wouldn't be fair not to mention Charles Darwin, Karl Marx, Charles Dickens and Florence Nightingale, all as interesting inclusions in their own right, but there's something about the British Bulldog that simply can't be ignored. Origins is a game that is highlighted by its incredible historical representation of ancient Egypt, and that's served tenfold by its flawless showcase of Cleopatra, one of the most significant pharaohs to ever grace the land. Wow, you could make a drinking game out of how many times I say significant or important in this. From her seductive introduction to her eventual betrayal, she plays perfectly into the series' themes of power and corruption, and her impact on the series as the greatest kill of Amunet can't be discounted. In a way, Cleopatra acts as the catalyst for the creation of the Hidden Ones, leading Bayek to hunt down the Order, using his dedication to his role as Medjay to use him as her own weapon, before disregarding the traditions he's loyal to and allowing him to break free from them. You all know I don't like Odyssey, so let's be quick here. The best part of Odyssey is easily that opening scene with Leonidas. It's like one of the 3 actual cinematic cutscenes in the game, and the absolute aura it exudes is incredible. This game peaks in its first scene, and to be fair, we do get to see a side of the Greek war leader that's softer and more introspective than what we're used to. This scene though is exactly what an ancient Greece game should be. Now, as we all know, AC Valhalla is simply too fucking long, and because it's so garishly big, its characters can be very hit and miss, due to significant portions of time away from them. Alfred, however, stands as one figure that feels present throughout the entire game, even when we don't see him. In the scenes we do, he has an aura of intimidation that makes him feel as if he'll end up being the most imposing villain in the entire series, but as Eivor progressively uncovers his true nature, and as his power and influence on England crumbles, he becomes a sort of anti-villain. Never do we show down in a grand battle with Alfred, as Eivor's last encounter with him reveals him as the leader of the Order of the Ancients in a simple conversation at sunset, where he reveals his true motives, not to expand the Order, but to reform it, to build it into something anew, something that has clearer values and goals, an Order aligned with Christianity that seeks peace and order as opposed to control. The Templar Order, which he talks about in the same way we see Haytham talk about it in AC3. A Templar Order that is pure, one that cares not for corruption. This perspective on the creation of the Order makes the versions we see in the past games even more interesting, as it becomes clear that the likes of Robert de Sable, Rodrigo Borgia and Germain have manipulated and warped it farther than even we knew. As a result, Alfred becomes not only one of the best characters in Valhalla, but perhaps the most important character in the entire franchise. AC Mirage presents to us the Zanji Rebellion, considered to be the most brutal and vicious uprising in the history of the Abbasid, and a rebellion led by Ali ibn Muhammad, who we see Basim ally with during the course of Mirage. Although an ally, Ali is distinctly opposed to the belief system and the hierarchies of the Hidden Ones, despite a desire for freedom. The debates him and Basim engage in are core to our protagonist's transition away from the dogmatic approach to the creed he's taught by Roshan, and pushes him further towards embracing his shadowy Isu second half. Ali argues that the creed contradicts itself, a predilection shared by Altair in the years to come, as he points out numerous hypocrisies in the Brotherhood. He argues that if the aim of the Hidden Ones is achieving true freedom, then the strict hierarchy the Hidden Ones themselves organize in is antithetical to their goals. In other words, their means to freedom are opposed to the goal of freedom itself. These contradictions in the Creed have appeared in the series before, both in Altair and Edward's argument against the Creed, but Mirage is the first game to present them as its central theme, hammered home partly by Nahal and partly by Ali, which is an interesting presentation due to the more anarchical approach taken by the Zanji rebels. It gives a visual explanation of the difference between the assassins' fight for freedom and the potential for their goals to fall into anarchy and chaos, and explores the nuances between these two stances. And with it, for the first time in years, it explores these ideas with genuine depth. Plus, Ali is just a cool guy. And that is the best historical character from every Assassin's Creed game. And if you did enjoy the video or you found it interesting, it would really help me out if you could hit like, and if you're new here, make sure to subscribe with post notifications turned on. Comment down below and let me know if I left any characters out, or there's any other characters that you found interesting, because I'm a massive history nerd and I'm always interested to hear about it. With all that being said, thank you so much for watching. I've been Joe, aka Found a Scarab, and I'll see you in the next one.